Hello, this is Dr. Jacqueline Rainershek. I'm with DTP-Leadership Group. This is Hot Topic Bold Talk. I'm going to talk to you about a holiday survival guide. How do you talk with MAGA relatives using facts, not fury? Now, I know something. I'm going to do something that's different. This episode is for anyone who's walking into the holidays with family gatherings that you think, I have knots in my stomach because I care about my relatives, yet I know the conversation is going to wander into mega land. So, what I want to do is talk to you about what you can do. You might be thinking, I don't want to fight with them. I don't want to be embarrassed and backed into a corner. I'm tired of being told I'm brainwashed by the liberal media when they're repeating the same Fox News segments from last night. So, this episode is a toolkit for you, a survival guide. I want you to walk into those rooms with confidence, with calmness, and reassurance. And here's what's most important. The more printed articles you have on hand, the stronger your position because they won't have any. That's not what they do. So, mega relatives usually come in and they show up with rarely anything that is a primary reference. And they certainly won't show up with printed materials like you're going to be. They show up with aggressive vibes, talking points, and a kind of confidence that isn't rooted in evidence. If you can say, actually, I've got an article right now that's on that, and so let me show you the difference in what you're talking about and what I found in the news. So today I want to give you some very clear things. I'm going to give you a short list of real Democratic wins and changes that are happening right now with resources. You're going to get reference lists. You're going to have the key contradictions and abuses inside Trump's second term that are very hard for anybody to defend. You're going to have the Public Citizen, which is an excellent resource. It's a legal institute that bases their arguments and tools on very clear statements about illegal actions and things that Trump is doing right now that prevent people from having constitutional duties and being responsible to the Constitution of the United States. And then I'm going to ask you to have printed materials and resources that take with you so you won't have a problem. And I even give you a list where you can get it from my blog if you want, but I'm going to read it off to you. I'm going to give you the things so you can create your own and then you'll have it ready. Now, I'm not going to say that this clearly can start and have total success, but I can guarantee it's going to be different. And besides that, you are not obligated to debate with anyone. Your job is not to convince Uncle so-and-so at the dinner table that he's really wrong. Your job is to stay sane, protect truth, and if possible, plant some seeds of doubt where propaganda has taken hold. So the first part I want to talk about is hope, momentum, and democratic wins that you can point out. And let's start where someone is really important. Things are changing. See, megas want you to feel like Democrats never win, they'll never deliver, and definitely with all this gerrymandering, we're never going to win. We're never going to move voters. But the facts say otherwise. Miami just elected the first Democratic mayor in nearly 30 years, and she's not Hispanic. So, Miami, yes, that's Miami, where Republicans have dominated City Hall for decades, have finally elected Ellen Higgins as a Democrat, as a mayor in a runoff election on December 9th. She won by nearly 20 points over Trump's backed Emilio Gonzalez. And she's also Miami's first female mayor. So, why does this matter? First of all, it's going to matter to your mega relatives if they even know about it. But Miami is majority Hispanic, long-standing Cuban American Republican power networks. Trump personally tried to make this race a referendum on himself, and he lost because people are not pleased with him. His polls are dreadful. The results shows that even in places where Trump brags about building a political empire, voters are pushing back, especially when local Democratic organizations are focused on affordable and ethical government. So here's what you can say at the table. If Trump's movement is so unstoppable, what's the reason that Miami, one of his favorite bragging grounds, just voted for a Democratic mayor for the first time since 1990? Then you can go to Illinois, where they passed a new limitation on immigration enforcement. On December 9th, 2025, Illinois governor signed a law that restricts immigration arrest around state courthouses, expands protection for residents, and makes it easier to sue immigration agents for rights violations. And by the way, in my blog, I'm going to give you the resources exactly with the statements I'm making. Then I'm also give you a reference list. This is a direct response to Trump's aggressive immigration raids and courthouse targeting arrest, which are widely seen as intimidation tactics. So, what is the reason that this matters? It's a state level resistance that actually changes people's daily safety. It shows Democrats doing what megas constantly claim they won't. Democrats are protecting law-abiding families from chaotic federal overreach. There are other states, California and New York, have similar laws. This is a growing pushback model that says, we're not going to tolerate this. You're not going to do this with our immigrants. So how do we say this at a dinner table or a lunch? I'm not asking you to agree with every immigration policy. I'm asking you to agree that people shouldn't get kidnapped at courthouses. Illinois just made that a principal law. Besides, it's also in 2 other states. Then you can talk about Democrats in Congress and on the grounds are organizing again. Miami's race was fueled by bilingual volunteer recruitment, grassroots turnout, and a focus on everyday issues. That model is repeating across multiple states where Democrats are overperforming this year. Translation: Democrats are not dead. They're rebuilding and winning. Here's the next thing. Trump's anti-drug rhetoric versus his real actions. One way to handle mega talk is to point the contradictions that are so stark, they're hard to ignore, and you can't spin with things that are obvious. Trump accelerates the drug war talks, then pardons major drug traffickers. Trump uses the language of toughness, poisoning our country. That's what they are. Death penalties for dealers, narco terrorists, And then he uses pardons to free or reduce punishment for people convicted of major drug trafficking. Let's include people like Ross Ulbricht. He's the Silk Road founder. And Juan Orlando Hernandez. He's the former Honduran president who was convicted of trafficking. Why does it matter? This isn't compassionate clemency. It's power used for political reward and personal branding. It undermines the rule of law messaging. It shows mega morality is often tribal. Crimes don't matter if the person is useful to Trump. So here's a way to say this. I'm confused. Trump says drug traffickers are terrorists, but then he pardons high-profile traffickers. So is he serious about drugs or serious about whether somebody's loyal to him or not? Then let's go to the Washington Post. Trump pardons major drug traffickers despite his anti-drug rhetoric. This was done on 12/7/25. The president has granted clemency to about 100 accused drug-related crimes during his time in office. The lack of Trump's consistency in his message shows how he is not consistent, and he's looking from where he can get the most benefit by giving a pardon, so the person will have to be supportive to him. Another example of the Washington Post, the case of a felon who paid a lobbyist nearly $1 million to seek a Trump pardon. This is the nursing home magnate, Joseph Schwartz, was sentenced in April to 3 years for defrauding the government of $38 million. 7 months later, Trump pardons him, but the White House denies any lobbying ties. So if I don't want to face the truth, then what I do is lie, or I do anything to shift the burden from somewhere else. Another example is the Washington Post, making sense of Henry Cuellar's pardon. The president views clemency in the monarchical tradition. This undermines the rule of law. So he thinks he's some kind of king, and therefore maybe these people will be loyal to him if he gives them pardons. That's not what pardons are about. The next thing, the Venezuelan double tap strike and the mechanism of authoritarian power. Let's move to something that's really much scarier, I think. This is the part MAGA relatives often ignore. What Trump is normalizing about state violence. They're ignoring the fact that Trump is normalizing state violence, moving into states which he has no right. So what happened? On September 2nd, 2025, U.S. forces struck a suspected drug boat off Venezuela. The first strike killed most people aboard. 2 survivors clung to the wreckage. Then a second strike killed the survivors. What military observers say, it's what we call a double tap. The administration claims the boat was headed to the United States with deadly drugs. Therefore, lethal force was justified. But Admiral Frank Bradley, who oversaw the operation, briefed Congress on December 5th that the boat was actually headed to Suriname to transfer its cargo to another vessel, not directly to the United States. Why does this matter? The justification is collapsing that Trump is giving. Her head Seth keeps giving. The survivors may have been trying to surrender and were killed anyway. Legal experts say that killing shipwrecked survivors is a possible war crime. The biggest pattern, I think, is the authoritarian behavior in which is in practice. Expand executive killing power. Let's make sure everybody see that I have executive power to kill people. The terrorist labels to bypass due process. If I name them terrorists, then I can bypass the due process. Shift stories after the fact. Demand loyalty from the system, even when it's illegal. And shifting the stories as if they are factual, which they're not. Demand loyalty from the system, even though it's illegal. And Republicans, many walk out of the classified briefings satisfied, not because they proved legality, but because they're choosing alliance to Trump over the law. So how do we say this at something where we're sitting with relatives? Now, wait a minute. If Obama or Biden had ordered a second strike on the survivors clinging to wreckage, Fox News would say it was murder. How is this fine when Trump is doing the same thing? Then there's the public citizen. It's a legal group here in the United States that has sued Trump many, many times. It's continuing to do so because of the actions he's taking. Now, here's what we see in the public citizens on Sunday, November 30th, called Terrifying Gangs of Ruthless Thugs. Members of the U.S. military swear an oath to the Constitution. They're obligated to refuse illegal orders. So, public citizen, which has all lawyers representing it, is addressing the issues we have with Trump accusing 6 members of Congress, each a veteran or a national security professional, that publicly reminded service members that they have a duty to support the Constitution, to support the rule of law, not to support illegal military actions. These individuals are Jason Crow, Chris DeLucio, Maggie Goodlander, Chrissy Houlihan, Mark Kelly, Eliza Stratkin. Now, many of these people I know, and I've read about them, I've seen them, I've listened to speeches and whatever. Public Citizen is warning all of us that Trump is amplifying threats against them and implying political punishment. Or with Kelly, it's going to put him back in this, call him back to service and then court-martial him. But he's implying political punishment for telling the truth, that the authoritarian move is attacking people who remind institutions to follow the law. So how do we say this one? Patriotism means loyalty to the Constitution. It does not mean loyalty to one man. That's not liberal thought. That's literally the oath that people take as service individuals who's serving our country. We can also connect it to the Venezuelan strike. If a Hedgeseth ordered leave no survivors, that's an illegal order. And Public Citizen says and applies the following: You must refuse illegal orders, even if they come from the president's circle. This is where MAGA relatives often short circuit. They want law and order for everyone, but they want immunity for Trump and his side. Let's look at Texas redistricting, and I'm taking the gerrymandering that's happening in my state, but it's happening all over the country. I'm including a letter from Representative Lizzie Fletcher, who I have great respect for, another attorney that represents my district in the House of Representatives. Texas passed a congressional map that Richard Wilson and I talked about in the previous podcast. A federal district court heard 9 days of evidence and found overwhelming proof of unconstitutional racial gerrymandering in a 160-page opinion. The lower court ordered Texas to keep the current map for 2026 while the case proceeds. The Supreme Court stepped in anyway and allowed the new map to be used, basing it on the right to have partisan politics determine a map. Why does it matter? Gerrymandering lets politicians choose voters instead of voters choosing politicians. Let me repeat it. Gerrymandering lets politicians try to choose voters instead of voters choosing politicians. It's locked in minority rule. It's how Republicans keep House power even when they lose the national vote. The GOP is rushing to redraw House maps after the Supreme Court wins. So the Supreme Court has literally given green lights for these kinds of gerrymandered maps. So the GOP is rushing to exploit the window. Democrats are forced into a defensive posture, and democracy degrades further and further by the gerrymandering. It's interesting. They're fools because voters, there are many who are very upset about the gerrymandering. There's not support for gerrymandering unless you're threatened or you get violent attacks, so forth, which is what happened in Indiana, because they didn't want to gerrymander their state districts, but they got threatened. And that's Trump's doing. So how do we say it? If your ideas are so popular, you don't need to rig maps. Gerrymandering is what you do when you know voters would fire you if you had a fair shot. I think there's a way to handle MAGA relatives. And I think there's some very practical guidelines. You can call them rules, whatever you want to call them. But these guidelines, I think, can be very helpful to you. Let's talk about the strategy I've realized over the years. Facts alone aren't enough, but if you have those facts and you can present them, you can easily walk away, and then they won't have to argue because they don't have the facts. They don't have the resources or the references. But one of my guidelines, the first one is don't debate or fire hose. MAGA relatives often toss 10 claims in a minute. Your job is to pick one and slow it down. Well, let's see. Let's take one at a time. Do you want to talk about the Venezuelan strike or do you want to talk about pardons first? And stick to it and refuse to do more than one. Guideline 2, ask for sources. This is where you win without raising your voice. Where did you read that? Do you have an article that shows me what you read? They usually don't. And you do because you have the references. Guideline 3, soft certainty. Instead of you're lying, which might be the thing you'd like to say, try this. That's not what the reporting shows. In number of references that I've looked at, here's what is being said. And then lay down a piece of paper to show them. Guideline 4, know when to exit. If it becomes a place where you're being mocked or insulted or it's circular, just say, I care about you and let's talk about something else. I'm not going to go around in circles or argue with you. That's strength. It is not surrender. But here's a printed resource. It is a counter lie kit that I'm providing you. So you can bring it to the dinner in a printed stack. Even if it's 3 to 5 pages of highlights, it changes the whole energy. The A part is Democratic wins and momentum. Number 1, Miami elects a Democratic mayor. December 9th, 2025, first in 30 years, first woman mayor. Highlight, Trump endorsed the opponent and lost badly, 20 points difference. 2, Illinois restricts courtroom immigration arrest. December 9th, 2025. Buffer zone legal protection. Then the next one. B, Trump hypocrisy on drugs and pardons. Trump's pardon drug kingpins while preaching a drug war. NPR, KUOW have summaries and examples, and I've given you those references in the blog. Ross Albright, his pardon is contradicting what Trump says, death penalty for dealers rhetoric. This is in Newsweek. Or John Orlando Hernandez pardon. He's a former Honduran president who was convicted of trafficking. C, Venezuelan double tap strikes and due process. Admiral briefs Congress was not heading to the U.S. Survivors killed in a second strike. Comms unclear, surrender disputed. Experts call second strike likely war crime territory. Public citizen, constitutional duty arguments. Service members must refuse illegal orders. List the 6 veteran lawmakers and oath logic. So use the provided text and the references I'm giving you because it is very hard to counter things like this. Put it with the Venezuelan strike story as the real world test case. E, Texas and national gerrymandering. Supreme Court let Texas use map despite lower court finding the racial gerrymandering. Why does this lock in minority rule and threatens democratic legitimacy? Alito's the one that did it. He's the one that has been questioned over and over again. So this is how I'd like to close. What you're really defending is, let me say it this way. These conversations aren't just about politics. They're about reality. See, if we have them face reality and what's going on out there, then they're going to have a hard time with their various points. A healthy family can disagree on tax rates or immigration levels, but a democracy can't survive if one side believes a president can kill without due process. Maps can be rigged because we deserve to win. Pardons are for loyalists And truth is whatever the loudest cable show says at 9 p.m. So don't walk in afraid. Walk in grounded with your references and walk in prepared. And if all you do is quietly place a printed article on the table and say, here's what I'm looking at, you've already done something powerful. You have defended reality. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And I'm going to continue as we go through the holidays to provide you more skills and more survival tools that may be truly beneficial to you. Thank you so much for listening.